Most people today turn to digital sources, social media, the internet to get entertainment, information and learning even. I guess that's what you're doing now. If you want to learn who invented football, then guaranteed you will come across multiple sources that will tell you association football emerged out of public schools and universities in the mid-1800s, and in October 1863, when the now called newly forming Football Association needed a set of common rules, they looked no further than those produced by student footballers at Cambridge University. They simply adopted these, and by doing so gave birth to the beautiful game, which went on to become the globally loved sport the masses watch and play today. Well done, London FA. There's only one slight problem with this story. It's actually not true. Not completely anyway. Welcome back to the channel. You join us in the last of 3 parts of our mini-series, which is trying to understand how association football, the planet's biggest sport, how it came into being, how it was invented. If you've seen the first 2 parts, you'll already know that in its earliest years, up to 1877, organised association football had 3 main influences. Cambridge footballers spreading their game far and wide, the birth of the organised game in Sheffield in 1857, and finally the need in 1863 to codify the London game to mirror what Sheffield was already successfully achieving. We also learnt in part 2 that there was no football club at Cambridge University before 1873, so no actual Cambridge club that was able to contribute to this early invention process. We need to head to a conclusion at the end of this video and score each of our 3 main influences by percentage points to identify the extent each one contributed to the evolution and invention of the modern organised game of association football. So off we go! I want to take you back to 1863, North London. I haven't got the budget for a Hollywood set, so you're going to have to work with me on this one. Imagine you are Ebenezer Morley, acting secretary, sitting inside the Freemasons Tavern on Great Queen Street in London. It's Tuesday, the 1st of December 1863. You are in the room where the first 1863 meetings of the newly forming London FA took place between late October and early December. You are overseeing the birth of what we now call the Football Association. As I've said, you are acting secretary of this new group. You're there with representatives from 13 London clubs, discussing your new association's footballing code. Nobody is present from Cambridge. No club exists at this point, remember? There are, however, observers invited from Sheffield. Your first meeting was actually 5 weeks ago on the 26th of October. Discussions since then have been lively. At your 4th meeting just last week, John Alcock, brother of Charles Alcock, had presented the newly published Cambridge University rules. You hadn't seen the latest Cambridge University rules before this 4th meeting, since they only appeared in Bell's Life on the Saturday before this. You are already aware of Cambridge graduate Fring's simplest game rules, but discussion of these 2 combined Cambridge influence codes is not enough to get a majority of the meeting supporting an association code which restricts handling and hacking and favours dribbling. You are desperate for an association code to emerge that will be accepted wider than London, especially in the then football powerhouse, football mad town of Sheffield, where Sheffield FC effectively act as the local association, being the model for multiple clubs that have set up there. These clubs playing a common code, enjoying a successful and growing footballing culture. You are aware that your invited Sheffield guests are staring over your shoulder, closely monitoring which way you're going to guide your London ship. Despite all your previous discussions, as I've said, including the Cambridge Code, your rules at this point look like violent rugby and include handling, running with the ball and hacking. This is not the game you want. It's not what Sheffield wants. This 1st of December gathering is now your 5th meeting. Something has to happen. An intervention to tip the scales your way is needed. Where is this crucial influence, you pray? And then something did happen. It came in the form of a letter from this man, William Chesterman, then secretary of Sheffield FC. Chesterman sent a letter to this 5th London FA meeting on the 30th of November. Inside, he included a set of Sheffield's rules, annotated to show its benefits. He also included Sheffield FC's subscription to join the London FA, but most crucially he included an argument against the London FA's rules as they stood on the 1st of December. He called the handling rule like wrestling, and heavily criticised the hacking rule. A week later, Chesterman's letter had worked. On the 8th of December, At the sixth and final meeting, your new London FA voted wrestling and laming out of your new code and agreed a final version. Thanks to Sheffield's Chesterman, association football was born. The Freemasons Tavern was built in 1775 but was demolished by the Freemasons Grand Lodge in 1909. It was replaced with the Connaught Rooms that currently sit in its place. The spiritual successor to the Freemasons Tavern is the Freemasons Arms just down the road on Long Acre. The building the Freemasons Arms sits in was built in 1896, so I'm not certain of what the original link was between the two pubs, if any. However, inside there is a display on the wall to remember the London FA's early meetings at the tavern down the road. It is actually the only display about the London FA's early meetings in the whole pub, or in fact anywhere that I am aware of. This display mentions Chesterman's letter and his influence on how association football eventually developed its own code in late 1863. It mentions how the letter swung the balance away from rugby and towards what became modern association football. If you can find this display in here, just yards from the historic meeting place, why does this part of football invention always get totally written out of history by others? So Sheffield's Chesterman letter became the significant influence tipping the scales firmly against hacking and full handling. As the Freemasons Arms display correctly states, without Chesterman, we would have basically ended up with a form of rugby. The Cambridge rules and their influence on the London FA has by many been grossly over-exaggerated. When it mattered during that fourth meeting, the Cambridge rules weren't enough on their own to reverse the debate back towards a less violent dribbling game. Chesterman's influence was crucial. His subscription, Sheffield rules and comments carried the day, and future accounts of these events need to more accurately reflect this. Despite what I've just said about the degree of influence the Cambridge rules had, it is fair to say that the eventual new London FA laws did take inspiration from both the Sheffield and Cambridge rules. We haven't the time for an in-depth analysis here, but in brief, London's rules had a similar offside to Cambridge, and like their game, still no crossbar. London's rules also included Sheffield's fair catch, and throw-ins for example. Most importantly, all three sets of rules discouraged handling and hacking, of course. London's new rules in 1863 were actually much like dribbling rugby, with no hands or forward passing. Sheffield's more open, less restrictive forward passing combination game with crossbars and soon to include rules like 11 aside, the 90-minute game, no handling at all, heading, corners, etc. meant that the Sheffield game was, even in its very earliest days, the closest set of rules of the three sets to the game we now have today. When the FA played a game to show off its new rules, it recognised Sheffield's significance at that point by inviting individuals from Sheffield to play in the game. As a young man in his early 20s, Harry Chambers was Sheffield FC's representative at the launch of the Football Association in 1863, and he holds the honour of playing in the very first official show game for the new laws played at Battersea Park on the 9th of January 1864. Sheffield continued to support the growth of the London FA during its very earliest years, and in March 1866 Chesterman suggested that they play a match between London and Sheffield, again to promote the evolving rules. Battersea Park was again the venue. This match established certain rules as standards, such as 11 aside, 90 minutes, and the ball size. Sheffield's overall influence on football invention was crucial in late 1863, but it didn't stop there. Cambridge's rules and influence happened for just a few minutes during just one meeting out of the 6, and that then was the end of their contribution to football invention. However, in the 14 years after 1863, Sheffield's influence carried on. Its rules developed alongside London's. As we've seen in earlier videos, Sheffield rule changes adopted by London during the following 14 years were massive. 2/3 of all the later London rule changes originated from Sheffield. Since both London and Sheffield codes amalgamated in 1877, amalgamated not adsorbed, we still play by Sheffield rules over 165 years after they were first written. Yes, when you watch a game today, you are watching a game played by the latest version of the first rules written by an organised club, Sheffield FC's rules. That's invention influence staring back at you at every football match you watch. But there's even more. In January 1867, the world's first county FA formed in Sheffield. In February that year, Sheffield held the world's first competitive football tournament, the Oden Cup. At the same time, Morley's London FA was arranging to meet. The just 6 people attended this London FA February 1867 meeting. Yes, just 6 people were still interested in keeping association football going in London. London was giving up, considering dissolving themselves. The first 3 years and 2 months of their experiment had all but failed to take off in the capital. Rugby was now becoming the capital's game. Association matches were in decline. Once again, something had to happen to convince the London FA to carry on, persevere, allow time for people like Alcock to get his FA Cup going. Once again, something did happen. Again from the still thriving football town of Sheffield, but this time in person and in attendance at the meeting. This key influencer convincing the London FA to carry on, coming with messages of a new Sheffield FA, a new Sheffield Cup tournament, over 1,000 members of its multiple clubs. You guessed it, William Chesterman. Chesterman in 1863 gave the London FA the rules it wanted, and in February 1867 Chesterman saved the London FA from itself. If you want to find a key influencer right at the heart of the invention of association football, then I give you, once again, Sheffield's William Chesterman. So why do we not see Chesterman in the National Football Museum's Hall of Fame? Why not Creswick, Prest, Shaw, Sunderland, Chambers, Yoden and others? Is it because the National Football Museum might have to start recognising that Sheffield was actually a massive part of football history and start including them in a museum that currently has nothing to credit its multiple contributions and influence? Maybe they also might have to admit that they've got a few Hall of Fame entries wrong and revisions are needed, quick. Well, I think we've heard enough. Enough to now be able to make a judgment after 3 videos as to who had the most influence on the invention of association football. As we've said, we are going to score by percentage points each of our 3 main footballing inventing influences. It's crude but fun, so go with it. Let's start with the London FA, now the FA of course. So yes, during the period of football's invention, pre-1877, the London FA did start the first ever football association, invent the FA Cup, the world's 3rd oldest cup tournament, and they did produce some rules, but their impact on football development wasn't strong initially, and the fact that they did try to give up in 1867 does to a degree need to affect their overall score. I've given the London Football Association a respectable 14% and the bronze medal. Cambridge University didn't have an early football club, but they did have early influential rules. Rules written by keen early footballers, keen enough to promote a game similar to association football far and wide. Sheffield's inspiration for the early organised form of the game came from these pioneering footballing students. We need to balance this all out with the fact that the Cambridge rules influence has, I feel, been greatly overhyped, especially in late 1863. So overall, 19% and silver second place for Cambridge University. Sheffield. Sheffield invented organised football. It has the earliest clubs, organised club rules, matches, grounds, tournaments, the world's first footballing culture. Sheffield inspired organisation in London, tipped the balance in favour of the game we have today and away from rugby. It then saved the failing London FA, convincing them to carry on to be able to join its codes with them to eventually end up with what we have today, modern association football. Sheffield's influence, as we have seen, is massive compared to London and Cambridge. Sheffield on its own didn't invent football, but football wouldn't exist today as we know it without its crucial influence. We've seen that football invention was the result of many influences, but one thing is certain, the biggest influence by far came from Sheffield. Organised modern football owes its invention to Sheffield, its home and the city where it was born in. So to Sheffield, 67%, first place and the gold medal. I know you're going to say, well, you would give this score. Your channel is called Sheffield, the home of football. But I challenge you to look at the facts and give your own assessment. Leave your score in the comments. See if you can, in all honesty, leave them out of first place. So that's the end of our short series, Who Invented Football? Many thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it reveals something new about the real history of our beautiful game. A final word, this time to the people of Cambridge. We thank you for your wonderful footballing students, but please consider doing something with that strange monolith that sits in a quiet corner of Parker's Piece. You don't need to knock it down, but I do have some suggestions for altering the text on it. Till next time.